Are we recording? Is this thing on?
Yes, it is. Welcome to RevOps 500, where we invite the world's top marketers to answer the tough questions facing growing organizations.
Ooh, sounds important.
I'm Sajeel Qureshi.
And I'm Gil Pei. Join us as we dive deep into the world of RevOps.
We'll be learning strategies and expertise from first-hand experience. RevOps 500 is sponsored by CompuTech. They provide technical and development expertise in growth-focused marketing.
Let's get started.
Hey everyone, Sajeel Qureshi here with another episode of RevOps 500, where we interview some of the world's greatest B2B marketers. And today, I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm talking to a compassionate entrepreneur who cares a lot about clients and employees. She's what many people call a HubSpot champion. I'd call her that too. She's a founder of a HubSpot Diamond partner, a Remotish. She's also the co-owner and remote culture advisor at CULTURIsh. And also, she's a fellow partner advisory board member at HubSpot. She's also an angel investor and New Fund Venture Group member as well. Nicole Pereira, welcome to RevOps 500.
Thanks. That was probably the fanciest introduction I've ever had before.
There you go. So definitely, hopefully, it's one you'll remember. Anyway, so Nicole, why don't we just jump in? So, what is one RevOps myth that you could share with our listeners?
Oh my gosh, I'm kind of on this tirade right now where I'm finding that everyone is over engineering everything right now. Like, I think simplicity needs to be something that we seek to do in RevOps, and somewhere along the way we all thought that if we do some really crazy wild things in all these systems and tools, that's the definition of RevOps, and we've lost our way. We need to find our way back home to the fact that RevOps is to make things easier, simpler, right, and more profitable. You're trying to make some revenue. You're not trying to complicate things.
So how do you do that? How do we find our way back home then? I mean, I agree with you. So how do we do that? What is it in your opinion? What is the way back?
It's the fundamentals. I find myself talking to people over and over, and they're so proud, they're so excited, and they're having so fun in one little spot of the RevOps world. And they just sort of like ignore the rest, right? And so this one area has like all this attention, super over-engineered, but the rest of whatever you're doing is like missing even the basic fundamentals, right? We're missing just the basics of what we need to get stood up, or to build a process, or to train a person, or to analyze data. It's like when we don't have all the fundamentals, just like a really good, healthy layer, then it's kind of difficult to go crazy and experiment on top of it and do something over here on the left and do something over on the right. And it's almost like we just have to go to the things that we learned in one-on-one, like don't forget like that starting layer of the things that we need, something simple, like maybe our audience will know, like a data dictionary. Like, make a data dictionary, define everything before you go off and create new things, like come together with a common language. And I meet people all the time, and they've just never spent the energy and effort to document, the basics of their communication with each other. What do the terms mean? How do you use it? And it's so interesting, because I feel like RevOps has sort of become technical implementation, but that's not RevOps, right? That's just a tactic and a skill that you use to deliver on your RevOps strategy, but that's not all encompassing RevOps, unfortunately.
So you hit on so many interesting things there. So one thing you obviously said was that, start with a data dictionary. That's one. You also said that, look, we've lost our way because it's become a big implementation thing versus actual what RevOps is. And then you brought up, the term RevOps 101. So if you were teaching a RevOps 101 course to, say, a bunch of college kids or, business executives who are trying to learn, okay, what the truck is RevOps anyway. I mean, like, what would be in your syllabus? Like, what would you have in your syllabus for a RevOps 101 course to keep people on track?
Yeah, you have your people, your process, your systems, your analysis. That's sort of like the basics that people hear about when they how does a company make the journey that someone goes through? And honestly, what is the journey that the dollar goes through from its potential to its actualization? A lot of people in RevOps actually don't know how a company makes money. And so when they come in, they just sit and they're basically doing sales ops or they're doing marketing ops, but they're not really doing like a full revenue, like engine sort of assistance situation, right? Like they really don't understand how money is made. So I think the 101 is like, how do you make money? What is the buyer's journey, right? How do then the tools and the processes and the systems and the data, how does that make that money? How does it help that money be made? And then how do we make it faster? How do we make it more efficiently? Right? How do we find out where we're losing it? You know, like that's truly what RevOps is. But I think you and I, as technology partners, I think the technology has sort of taken over the RevOps space. I think RevOps was a term coined by a lot of software, right? So it sort of has this like flavor of technical implementation and administration. But honestly, you could do great RevOps and never use a single tool at all, right? Like just imagine somebody comes into a store and hands you some money and they want to be delivered their service and they have to wait, you know, for the order to be prepared. It's like RevOps in its essence is not, it doesn't need a tool. The tools are just, they should be there to enable your ability to improve.
It sounds like what you're saying is that RevOps itself has been around for a while, but you know, the term and the phrases and the buzzword, it's got like a, as you said, it's like technological meaning to it, or it's probably coined by some SaaS company or SaaS B2B marketer, SaaS engineer somewhere, sales engineer along the way. But for you, it's been around for a while. You know, it's the idea of transaction for service, and then what that whole process entails to make sure that, you know, it goes well. Like, where is it coming in from? Where are we wasting it? And where is it? How's it being delivered? Like the product or service. Is that pretty accurate, or?
Yes, and it's kind of, it had a different life before sort of this
Sure.
new tech-enabled approach. So I think if anybody knows anything about like Lean or Six Sigma or how they did it in the manufacturing world, right, with the industrial era, we're like, oh, how do we improve our output? How do we be efficient? How do we get rid of waste? It's kind of the same thing, right? People who are in large corporations who are doing Six Sigma, they're trying to do change management. They're trying to be efficient because they know that the more efficient you are, the better you can actualize revenue, right? That's their approach. They're not necessarily trying to make more revenue, but they're trying to juice more from what you have, which efficiency is a tactic of RevOps, right? And
Absolutely.
so it's like it's been around in multiple flavors. It's had different names, it's had different approaches. We're just in the iteration that is very tech enabled. So I get it. That's what we lean on, these tools that help us seed the data, clean the data, maintain the data, and make things go faster, you know, do more with less. Like, I get it. But if you don't understand how you could do it maybe without the tech, right? Like, what is the process independent of any tool you'll ever use? Even if you know the process has to use some tool to get the job done, we've just sort of like crafted this idea that's like, okay, we picked some tech first and then we jam all our process into what the tech can give us versus going, no, this is what the process needs to be. And then let's see what we have, what people, you know, what tools, what things we need to do to deliver on the process.
Right. And that's such a, it's such a powerful thing, right? And to go back to the previous question we were talking about, like if you're running a RevOps 101 course, maybe a good exercise is trying to do RevOps without any of these tools, like a CRM or some automated, you know, email sequence or ticketing system or something, right? And then just seeing, you know, and then understanding what the essence of RevOps is, which is, you know, it's commerce done lean, like in a Six Sigma efficient way, trying to make it leaner. I mean, would you consider, like, I mean, is that something that you, I mean, you've done ever with like with a client or with a fellow marketer, is trying to run RevOps without a tool? And I mean, could you do it, you think?
Yeah, no, it was always a fun exercise with me and my one of my previous team members. She actually runs a whole course now on documentation, and she actually runs HubSpot's RevOps Bootcamp. But a
Nice.
lot of our theories were like, hey, can we first map out like what we're trying to achieve in a spreadsheet, right? Like, I guess the spreadsheet in itself is tool enabled, but it's like the bare bones.
Yeah, sure,
You know,
sure.
everybody knocks on a spreadsheet. Like you in theory could do it handwritten on a piece of paper, but you know, can you do the process on a spreadsheet? Can you understand what the process needs to be? Can you refine the process? Can you figure out what's wrong with the manual pieces? What's wrong with how you're storing the information? What's wrong with how you're referencing the information? Can you do that before then you go, okay, now how do we improve this process? We all just start with a very fancy over-engineered process before we've been able to validate that it's even going to do the trick, you know? And I don't know, I'm sort of in this pullback mode. I don't know if I have the answers, but right now I'm more in the theory, right, of the fact that I think we need to stop over-engineering a lot of our work, especially I think with where we're at, like as a global economy and the retraction that's occurring, right? Like people need simple more than they need complicated right now. You know, the companies don't have whole teams to manage their tech. Their IT teams have been decimated. Their administrators are gone. Their management has been like thinned out. The worker bees are trying to do everything. And so when they're inheriting a system with 500 automations firing off everywhere, it's like, it's not possible. And honestly, do you really need that? Most organizations don't, you know? And it's real interesting because it's like, had we still been gung-ho with the economy of 2021, right? Like plowing through, maybe we wouldn't have noticed, right? We were just so busy building. But right now we're in a retraction and we're sort of like now seeing the errors of our ways. We're seeing like, hey, we didn't build for scale. We just built because we were ferociously building. And now we're sort of being faced with like this decisions we made in the past going, hey, we got to take this back. We got to take it back to the basics. We have to make sure we have, you know, don't build a system that's bigger than you can maintain, you know, and honestly, keep it simple. Sometimes we automate something that we just did once, you know, like you do it once every 3 months. Like, you know what, honestly, it's just worth doing it once every 3 months versus automating it.
So if you go back, if you say keep it simple, now you remember you mentioned that, you know, you guys would validate ideas or you map them out on a spreadsheet to keep them very, very simple. How does one go about validating an idea or a process with just with a spreadsheet and not necessarily, you know, trying it? I mean, obviously, you know, we might not have budgets right now to try these things, right? Because, you know, the world is upside down a little bit, as you mentioned, when it comes to marketing spend and those sorts of things. So, you know, how do you validate that when you can't really go to the field and do it?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because a lot of the tools we use are just databases, right? And representation of the database. A spreadsheet is just a simple database, unconnected to something very fancy. So it like forces you to dumb things down. But something as simple as your pipeline and how you're managing the progression of your pipeline. Like, can you just make sure you can go in and maintain that data in a spreadsheet that you have appropriate, you know, timelines, like, hey, once this behavior occurs, I want you to go do this other behavior. You're not going to have some thing that tells you to do it. You just need to know that that's the next step in your process, and you need to understand what the timeline is. That's so simple, but then you go into these tools and you're like, oh, I'm going to make this really great sales pipeline. I'm going to have all these tasks load up. I'm going to have all these. If you can't do that in a spreadsheet, if you can't remember your next step in line in a spreadsheet, 50 tasks firing at you is not going to motivate you to go do the work. You know what I mean? So can you do the process manually in a simple way? Can you remember your steps manually in a simple way? If you can't do that, then you just don't have the commitment or the fortitude to have a sophisticated tool. You know, I think a lot of times people who are in any of the ops realm, they get so upset. They're like, oh, well, so-and-so is not putting data in the tool. Okay, well, the only RevOps thing you need to be doing is training right now and getting adoption, like of the baseline of whatever the thing it is that you have. Because if they're not doing the baseline, architecting the most fancy system won't ever matter because they won't use it.
That's such a it's such a powerful way of looking at it, and it's not something that you hear very often, right? Is that, people always say, oh, the data is important. We need, data cleansing. We need data management. Whereas what you're saying is more, you need to focus on like the very basics, on like the people, this
The
not
data
this.
input, like
Yeah,
just
the make sure data is
put
there, right? Like there's
info
not that it's
in.
clean, but it's there, and it is
There'll be nothing
something.
to clean if nothing's there, right? And there'll be nothing to manage if the process can't even be utilized. It's like I think there's something to learn from Six Sigma or the previous iteration, because they were all about change management. They were all about a simple idea that could have a big impact, and then they spend 90% of the time trying to help people change to that new idea. Training, right? Documentation, like iterations and reps, so that you're doing the behavior over and over until you can prove, okay, all right, everybody's using it now. Now we can see the improvement in efficiency. It's like that's one of the first things that you should really be doing, is like just understanding the processes, making the process simpler, making sure people adopt the process, like whether there's a tool or not. It's making sure
Mhm.
that all that's the basics, that's the foundation of things, right? Like, how do you hand things off? Can you map out an entire buyer journey? Can you map out how a dollar is sort of, understood to be possible through, lead generation, and then a dollar is actualized through a payment actually showing up in the bank? Can you map how all that works and make it really clear for people? Do people understand when they delay on their work, how it impacts those behind them, right? Like velocity, things like that. I think a lot of times also in RevOps, people feel that, like, by way of just doing the project, they're doing RevOps. Hey, I did the thing. We need the thing. I did the thing. I'm doing RevOps. Really, RevOps needs to be measurable, right? Are you improving velocity? Is something going faster or slower, if that's what you want it to do? Are you improving conversions? Are you getting a percentage at the rate that you're trying to get? Are you improving the volume, right? Are you getting as much or as little as you're trying to get? There's so little that is actually measurable and tied to revenue. And I feel like we've lost our way. We've just gotten so tech enabled. We lost our way. We don't really actually know what RevOps is. Like, we're still in a place where people are still arguing over the definition.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like, we're just trying to help the company make more money, like that is all that it is. And in the most comfortable way we can, because people are involved, and they're usually the biggest sticking point. But I don't know. I think if you can strategize an improvement to revenue manually, then the tools are just going to make you that much greater at what you do. But if you can't, the tools are never going to make up for lack of understanding of how to improve, like, a business so it can make more money.
It sounds like well, I know you're a gamer. It sounds like, it's like you could have the greatest gaming console or gaming system in the world, but if you don't understand the basics of how to play the game, it's not going to make a difference. You're never going to get the most out of that console. Is that a fair
Mechanics? Yes,
yes.
you need to know the mechanics of the game. You need to understand your opponent, right?
Right.
So you need to
Right.
understand all the players on the board, and that might impact what you do. And I've seen people with horrible equipment, but because they've mastered the strategy of doing the work, right, it doesn't hold them back. Sure, if they had a really fantastic, like, gaming rig or whatever, like, they
Right.
could probably amplify, but that's never, like, you're going to get more amplification from a really great player who has great equipment than really great equipment and a really mediocre player.
Yeah. And in the music world, we say tone is in the fingers, right? If you can play the instrument, doesn't matter what you play. You can play a guitar of any kind. It could be a fancy one or a Fisher Price one, but you can still play it if it's still whoever's practiced, it's those hours, it's that strategy understanding. So what you say is like, it's very, very profound, and it's not something you hear every day. So that's a very refreshing take on it. So Nicole, tell me, like, how did where did these ideas come from? Like, what's your story? How did you get into this whole world of of marketing RevOps? I mean, what's the journey been like for you?
Oh my. Well, in the 90s, I was building websites on Lycos and Angel Fire, and I had
Amazing.
I had a web ring and a repeating background and a guest book and all that fun stuff
Oh, nice.
for anybody who knows what I'm talking about right
I do.
now.
GeoCities for the win. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And back then we called ourselves webmasters, right? Because we
Yep.
were the masters of our websites. And so I started off there, and I got really good at SEO and ranking websites. I moved on into college, and when I got married and had my first babies, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I had a mommy blog for scrapbooking, and I was ranking page one for all these terms. I had an online scrapbooking store. I had an affiliate program with like 200 other mommy bloggers who were all reselling my scrapbook stuff. So I learned e-commerce. I learned all these things. I was editing PHP. And I landed my very first corporate job as an online ad campaign specialist for the local newspaper.
Mm.
And then out the gate, they had a really big project to revamp their ad system online. And I would sit in these meetings, and it was a multi-million-dollar software upgrade project. They were like replatforming and everything. No one there knew what was going on. So the developers and the software company was like trying to get answers from us. No one over here knew what to tell them. And I show up, I was like 26 at the time, but because I had self-taught myself all these technical environments and how they work together and like what you need online, I ended up leading this project to execution, like all by myself, because I had to PM it and get us to the finish line and make decisions and get it launched. So it was sort of my first taste of like what I could be doing to actually improve a business's ability to make money. A second project I picked up on the side while I was there was we would do the real estate ads. And the real estate ads had this ability where you could order a photographer. So this was back in like 2009. So you would order a photographer online, then they would send somebody out, they would take pictures of the real estate, and then it would come back. They'd load up the pictures to this file system, and then I would go and stitch it together and make those 360 views. Now they have software for that.
Yeah.
But the whole process was so clunky. Emails would get lost, updates wouldn't be known, people would get frustrated because their open houses would occur. It was like they were losing money, and they were making, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on this system. And during my short tenure there, it was like halving every quarter the amount of money that this was making, because it was so clunky, and it was a homegrown system that was built and wasn't maintained. There was no documentation. So I got permission to pick up a Django developer on the side, who he and I worked after hours on this project because he was so frustrated about fixing all the bugs all the time. And he's like, we just got to rebuild it. So I architectured the whole system, the flow, what we needed to do, how we can improve our customers' experience. I read, years worth of email complaints to understand what was the problem. And like we launched this new system, and within months we were back to like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of orders, And so it was like, 2 projects in a short period of time at a corporate level, where I was like, wow, with the right sort of understanding of like, how do we make money with this? What is the experience? How do we pull the tech? How do we pull the process? How do we pull the, how do we make sure we understand what's going on? That was sort of my big first taste. And then since then I went off and I consulted in marketing, I consulted in tech, and I had a series of jobs where I was both the IT girl because I was so technical. And then I was also the digital marketer, because at the time, really, people didn't have digital marketing jobs like as their full-time role. They were either traditional marketing or events or PR or whatever, but like only digital didn't exist. So I would be at a job dropping cables and internet cables and void, setting up VoIP and doing print drivers. And then I'd also be like maintaining the website and the social media and doing the blogs. And so it wasn't until 2013 that I got my first job where they're like, no, you're just going to do digital marketing. I was like, what? This is a dream, And I would tell all my friends, I'm getting paid to hang out on Facebook all day. This is so cool. It was just like the concept, I think, was so novel back then. And that's where I was introduced to HubSpot and Salesforce, and I became a HubSpot Salesforce administrator. And that's where I felt I really had the power, because now I moved beyond maybe tools to do like delivery, like service delivery, or tools to do ordering or whatever. I moved into like the whole back end of where you're trying to transition potential money into actual money. And that was a whole new world for me. And so what I did is I built my career sort of picking out all the pieces of the process, doing things manually, trying to pull it together, trying to get little like parts of it, the journey. And then I found the middle piece I was missing all along, which is more like the sales ops side, right? And then since then, I became a HubSpot partner, and it's just been downhill from them. But that's sort of how I started, because I truly love the tech. And I was identifying as like a MarTech person before there was a name for it. And one day I came across this blog, and it was chiefmartech.org. Scott Brinker. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I found people. Because I always felt like, the odd woman out. Nobody understood why I was so passionate about the underlying tech to do what I needed to do. I didn't want to be a content marketer, right? I didn't want to do graphics. I didn't want to do all the things that people normally associated with marketer. I wanted to be a technical marketer, but that wasn't a thing. And so when I discovered that blog, it sort of opened up my eyes to a whole new career path. I had an identity, and I now knew where to go. And ever since then, that's sort of where I've stuck.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of RevOps 500. This podcast is a great opportunity and channel for revenue operations and much more. If you've been thinking about a podcast or you want to shift production to a friendly team, check out ringmaster.com. They're the team behind this podcast. RevOps 500 is sponsored by Computan. Computan serves as the back-end dev and technology team for shorthanded marketing agencies and departments. Shorthanded? Wait a minute, that sounds like me. Now, let's get back to it. The end.
Yeah, I think we both probably discovered Scott's blog at the same time, given our similar ages, backgrounds, and adventures in the different IT universes and marketing universe intersections. That we probably discovered that same blog at the same time. You said that, and you said that, and I was like, yeah, I remember seeing Scott's blog for the first time too. So I remember what I was. I remember what kind of rock band I had on my T-shirt. I remember everything.
It was like an aha moment when you find your people and you understand you belong somewhere. Yeah.
Funny because it's true. It sounds like when you talk about your background, and it kind of goes full circle to what we started the conversation with, where you have your background, which is somewhat technical, somewhat creative, somewhat enterprising or entrepreneurial, and then when you put this technology in the middle, that's where it kind of connects everything, which I guess is kind of what RevOps is supposed to do, isn't it? I mean, you take all these different things. Some of it is technical, some of it is creative, some of it is, enterprising, like, where is the money coming from? How does it get managed? How does it get reported? And how does it get delivered? And you're saying that we've lost our way it sounds like, you're standing in a lab of RevOps engineers or marketers, and you have like your hands in the air and you're yelling like, enough, right? And you have we're talking about the wrong things. And it's kind of like your first interaction at the newspaper, right, where everybody is talking but nobody knows what they're talking about. And is it kind of like a similar vibe to that almost, is what you're feeling?
I think so, because true RevOps really is, in a way, you're somewhat of a business strategist, right? You're trying to go, here are all the resources I have available to improve whatever thing I've identified as getting in the way of our goals of making more money and aligning with our customers. And I think there are people who do the work within RevOps, like, hey, I am a solutions architect. A RevOps strategist would use me to deploy technology based on their specifications because they came up with that strategy. The problem is a lot of people who are solutions engineers want to call themselves RevOps strategists, and they're not. They have not been exposed to all the things, or they're just not interested in all the other things that they need to consider to develop a solution that truly may solve the problem. And so RevOps strategy, like as its own category, its own job title, its own approach, the all-encompassing way that you pull it all together, that's the one thing that I don't think people are actually doing.
Yeah, and that's hard to pin down why it's not happening or whatever, but it really does sound like, you know, if you get people in a room and you ask them, like, what exactly are we doing here, you take all the comments about like an agenda item, which could be, well, the data's coming here, we need to integrate with that, we need this custom object created for this thing. I mean, if you just say, okay, well, wait a minute, what exactly are we trying to do, what are we trying to build, what's trying to be sold, you know, you get down to the business of it, all those things probably become a lot easier to answer, don't they?
They do. And I think a lot of people want to be quick to prescribe a solution before they truly understand the problem. There's too much like building and not enough analysis occurring.
Okay.
You know, how do we understand what is actually happening? How do we know what our options are to test an improvement in the situation? How do we whittle it down to the best thing to test first? How do we analyze the results of that test? You know, like it's just, we're missing that whole thing. And I think the thing is, it's hard to do. It's a hard skill to acquire. If you and I are identifying in this way, and we're looking at our history that took 20 years to arrive to, then RevOps strategy is an elevated role. It's an elevated role. It's an elevated skill. It's an expensive skill. I think people aspire to have it, but I think two people are putting a label on the work that they do and trying to make it equal to that category, and it's not.
It's not. So here's a question for you. So if Nicole 20 years in the future comes back in time to 2023 and tells and you guys are, you know, obviously hopefully you guys are talking about more interesting and more exciting things in RevOps, but you know, if in the case you're not, I mean, what do you think future Nicole tells current Nicole now about what happened and how it happened and where things are then in the future?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not a big AI bandwagon person,
All right.
but I do think what AI is going to do is sort of try to make up for the lack of analysis skills that people have today. Right?
Okay.
So really smart people, like think about the stock market pickers. There's software out there that will do all the analysis for you. You just have to put in a little bit of what your goals are. Like, what am I trying to achieve? How do I want my portfolio? What am I looking for? What types of, you know, businesses do I want to invest in? Whatever. And it will just follow the market every day, all day long, and build a profile and start to make you recommendations so that you don't have to do anything. This happened in the ad world. If you can do a pretty decent job of running ads, if you buy the right tool these days, because so much data has gone into it, so much sort of analysis has been programmed into these tools, you hook in your ads accounts and then it tells you what to do. Hey, fix this. This is a leak over here. This is an improvement over there. So I do think because so few people possess this sort of business strategy skill to help a business make more revenue, I think that that's going to be the focus of a lot of AI investment to help bridge this gap, because it is just, it's hard to wait for Sajeel or a Nicole to develop over 20 years. Like, it's just, you can't, like, progress doesn't wait for that. So, you know, while I sit here going, we need to go back to the basics, we need to go to the fundamentals, we need to do all this stuff, it's also just something that is grown with time, and not everybody has that time. And so I do think I would tell myself to get a little more interested in AI so that I could go and be an operator or you know, or be the brain behind some of these tools of putting my analysis in them and help them to help other people, because progress is only going to be moving forward. So we need to do things. It's an exercise in RevOps, right? What tools can we use to make up for the lack of the knowledge we need to solve our own problems and make more money?
So Nicole 20 years in the future tells current day Nicole, the robots are coming, and get a license so you can drive them.
So get in on it. I think I need to, because I look at it going, I really see the problems that need to be solved to help businesses make more money could some sort of AI tap into the brains of the smartest people who know how to analyze business, right? At least get you farther than you could be if you were just trying to do it on your own.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, like, that's, the future are those things, and analysis happens quicker. You can drive to conclusions based off previous knowledge. So, maybe future Nicole is onto something with that. Like onto that onto that thing about, hey, you guys have to see the next wave coming. I mean, we were both, sounds like we're both part of that whole internet revolution. Building websites at a younger age, and then then you're coming in and then seeing the technology evolve, having some technology, being technology generalists, and then having to combine that with like an enterprising mind, because people age, and that these are our earning years, so we have to learn how to make money. So you combine technology with revenue, and you have this revenue engineer, I guess is the term you could use to call it. And then of course become technical marketers and those sorts of things. So who knows, maybe she's right.
Yeah, and I think where we're at right now, so 20 years from now, we know where we might go. But for now, it's almost like an exercise in restraint, right? Like, can you restrain yourself from trying to over-engineer things?
Yeah.
Can you truly try to build a simple solution that has the most impact on the revenue, right? Like that's the challenge. Can you actually simplify it and still make more money versus overcomplicating it and potentially making more money? Because here's the other thing that people don't consider. They've built static solutions. They feel like, okay, all the tech, all the people, and all the processes are going to remain the same forever. So now I'm building the Taj Mahal of automated engines because I don't believe anything will change. Well, what has happened this year? Everyone's getting laid off. All the tech budget's getting cut, right? And they're asking for processes to be way more streamlined, so you could just get to the end result faster. And so you can't do that now. When you have a bloated, over-engineered system, it's like you can't ramp up a new employee quickly, or you can't knowledge transfer fast to someone else. So then everything you built either becomes a lost sunk cost and has to be obliterated and taken apart. It's like you got to really build something that is elastic and capable of surviving whatever situation comes up. And that's why I'm like, if we go back to the basics, we build an evergreen system. We're like, for any situation, this is what will work. And then we have a second iteration where we're like, okay, these are the advancements that we are layering on top, well documented, separate from the core engine, that if we had to shut all this off, we can in an instant, and it would not topple the house.
That is an interesting and pretty cool, a pretty cool way of looking at it. I mean, if it can be done, it's almost like this utopian idea. And I guess, I mean, is building is putting good structure something that you do with Remotish? And obviously, I mean, CULTURISH is something very similar, but obviously a different kind of structure for a different kind of business. But what can you tell us about both, about Remotish and CULTURISH at the same time?
Yeah, I would say, compared to some of my competitors and our peers, we have a very undersized engine. We keep things quite simple. Every time I start seeing something getting a little bit bloated and out of hand, and I strip it back down, right? I'm like, no, we're getting a little too ahead of ourselves. We're a small team. We don't need that level of what's going on. And so even with our clients, I believe I've mapped out, there's 12 foundational RevOps projects that if you have HubSpot, you should have, or at least you should review and ensure that it either fits or doesn't fit your business model, but it shouldn't be ignored. And until you've established those 12, you really shouldn't build anything new.
Got it.
These are foundational things. Anything new would cause you to be sort of building a lopsided system, maybe only focused on this one area and not considering the full flow of how money goes through the organization. There's also kind of an order of operations where it's if you don't have these things built first, then these other things won't be built well, later, you got to go in order. And so it's like, I think every organization sort of needs to map what that is. Like, what are the foundational things we need? And those are the things that we're going to revisit over and over and over again. They're going to get maintained. And then we might layer some new projects on top, but then we're always going to reference this foundation, right? What are those critical pieces that we have in place? And so my organization does RevOps only for HubSpot. It's very narrow. We don't go the full cycle. We won't go outside of that platform. But I found 12 projects just within that system that spans your marketing, your sales, right? Your servicing, your remarketing, your customer communications, your data, all that stuff. And it's like, I feel like more people should sit there going like, what is our foundation? And documenting that and planning for that. And until that's perfected, you really shouldn't be doing anything else.
That's interesting. And what about CULTURISH? What can you tell us all about CULTURISH?
It's funny because CULTURISH is focusing more on like agency ops, but we're on HubSpot Starter. Like,
wow, interesting.
We're on HubSpot Starter. It's basic. It gets us what we need. We have our website on there. We do our sales pipeline on there. We have our event forms on there. I have a little bit of automation for my more repetitive tasks, and it like gets the job done. And I don't need something bigger. But contrary to that, when I was running Remotish as a much smaller team and I was doing all our sales, I had HubSpot Sales Enterprise just for me. I wanted to make sure I had my playbooks mapped out. I put automation in place. I had a really well mapped out process that enabled me well. I never missed a deadline, right? It was important to me. And that at the time, $800 was worth everything, because if I hired a full-time person to enable me in that way, I'm going to pay, $7,000 fully loaded salary, right? So it's like, it depends on the business, right? What's foundational for that business. For me, it was foundational to sell. I had to sell all the time. Whereas with CULTURISH, our brand is more focused on distribution of education, right? It's a very thought leadership oriented business. So my website has to be easy to find information. My ability to launch events has to be very, very easy. So in theory, in the future, I might look to upgrade to CMS Pro, because then I can do my events through HubDB, which really would make my time and energy efficient. That would be foundational for that business's like operating system and how it makes money and how it acquires customers. And so I don't know, it's just funny because I sit with people on my team and I like, you have to understand how the business makes money. Like, every business makes money differently. Some people collect payment at the point of transaction. Some people won't actualize the payment for a year after an agreement is made.
That's right.
Like, you need to know these things. And if you don't, your recommendation won't like serve the RevOps goals that you have very well. When they're like, hey, we want to close deals faster. And you're like, great. And then you help a company close the deal faster. But in theory, what they really want is to make the money faster. And it takes a year to get their payment. Now you actually got to be like, you know what? Deals don't actually have to close faster. We got to look at your like accounting system and your merchant system and how you're structuring your deal, like how long it takes to go through procurement. Like, that's where we need to be focusing on improving for this business's goals. And people they're missing that. And it's like, I think we need to go to business school. Or I think like if you're in marketing, you need to sit on sales calls and talk to salespeople, and then you need to go to service. It's like you have to chase like the knowledge, and you have to sit in the pain of the problem. And when you're so far separated, when you haven't sat in the middle of it, when you haven't dove in and really understood what the problem truly is, it's like our recommendations are just so canned these days. Like, you think you could just go through one checklist and it's perfect. And it's not. And it's and I say all these things and I say it's so simple and we need to go back to the basics. I do know it's hard, but that's why this role it needs to be somebody needs to aspire to build this knowledge and to arrive at this role, because the way we're defining this role right now is misaligned with what we need,
So let's go back to your comment about the money kind of comes in, but then it takes a year to get them. Sorry, the deal comes in, but the money takes a year to actually come into the company. So let's say you're a pizza parlor. the marketer brings all sorts of people to the door and says, oh, I brought you your deals. But then of course the problem is getting the pizza made. I mean, not everybody's running pizza like a multinational franchise. So it takes them 5 hours to make one pie of pizza. And that's really where the problem is, because they can't get the money without delivering the pizza. And then as a RevOps person, you need to go in and see, okay, why is it taking maybe so long to do that, and maybe trying to diagnose what that problem is, because it's really all about the money coming in, not so much just about the revenue, the top line revenue, but it's also making sure that you actually collect and you actually figure out, okay, why is it taking so long to heat it? Do we have an oven problem? Do we have a serving problem? Do we have a staffing problem? And are you saying RevOps needs to be involved in all of those questions and helping solve those answers?
I would say yes. Right.
Yeah.
That's RevOps, right? Like that, revenue doesn't just exist in marketing or sales or service. It doesn't
100%.
exist in trying to retain or resell a client. It exists in all of it, which that's why this is a hard role, because you literally have to be a sales and marketing and service and finance and like you have to be like really, really, you don't have to be an expert, but you have to be really clear on how it all works.
You have to ask the right questions, right? You have to ask the right questions.
And you have to know how they connect.
Yeah, who's fixing the oven? Who's cooking the pizza? Where are our green peppers? Where's the pepperoni? I mean, how come we can't make it? Is it sourcing problem? You don't know how to make it, but you know how to find who can make it, right? And those sorts of things.
There's a very famous clip from a movie about, I think, the owners of McDonald's. I don't know if you've seen this, where
the founder?
Yeah, they're sitting there and they go and draw, I think with some chalk on a blacktop, the layout of the back end of where they're cooking. Right. And they're doing it over and over again. And they're literally having people sit there mocking up like they're cooking, and they're seeing all the inefficiencies, and they have to get up on a ladder, right, to look down and understand, like, why are these two people bumping into each other? Why don't you have the condiments over here and the buns over here, and you need this much space over here? In theory, that's RevOps, right? How do we figure out how to deliver it? The problem is RevOps, coined really by technology companies, has said, well, RevOps is only technology. And it's not, right? Yeah. That's a tool used to enable improvement of your revenue operations. And so, I liked your example of the pizza. I think if we start to think in manual terms, right? Maybe something local, maybe something you have to physically do manually. I think that may change things, because right now, when everything's invisible, right? It's software, it's in the cloud, a process is invisible. When you actually have to do the thing, right? Do it in a spreadsheet, which is the most basic of software, but people feel like it's archaic. That will show you the pain. That will show you what's missing. That will show you what's next. That will show you what needs to be improved. And it's interesting, though, because I don't think people want to learn all those things. I think people who like to solution architect like to solution architect. And I think data analysts love to analyze data. And I think, people who want to do sales coaching and enablement to improve that, that's all they want to do. And they should be okay with that, but they can't call themselves RevOps strategists, right? They're confusing themselves and they're confusing everybody around them. Like, the role in itself and the delivery of that work that's coming from a singular person, it's a very specific craft.
Yeah, and it doesn't come easy, that's for sure. So Nicole, where can people get a hold of you? How can they connect with you if they're interested in doing so?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I think I tell people, if you want to get a hold of me, send me a LinkedIn message instead of an email, because you'll get a faster response.
So LinkedIn, okay, yes, that's great. And on my end, I mean, I've found this conversation incredibly enlightening. I mean, Nicole, I mean, we are in the same sort of we congregate in the same sort of environment sometimes professionally, you and I. And I mean, but it's been very, very refreshing to hear your perspective on RevOps and how perhaps we've lost our way. I know that I'm personally energized just to kind of talk to our gang and see kind of what we can do based off of some of these just these analogies that you've come up with, like how do you keep it simple using a spreadsheet, pulling out the different things and you're saying pretend the tools aren't there, let's see how this whole thing works. So I mean, like, that has been a very entertaining. It's been fun to have some of the retro conversation too with you. I mean, and I just can't thank you enough for jamming with me on this nice Thursday afternoon.
No, it's good to talk to somebody who's not like dating me. They're just like, oh yeah, I know that era. We're good.
Yeah, I mean, and if anyone was listening, if you enjoyed it, please, comment, share, do those things that marketers love for you to do. And Nicole, thanks again for coming on.
Awesome, thank you.
This has been another exciting episode of RevOps 500, and we'll see everybody next time. And that wraps up another episode of RevOps 500. Thanks for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at RevOps500.com. RevOps 500 is sponsored by CompuCare, providing technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing teams.